and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk ETC. We have another update for you of all the exciting ETC news. I have my great guests with me, Bob, Summerwill, Yaz, and Kevin. So welcome all you guys.
Hello.
Hey, Christian.
Hey, Christian. Thank you for having us.
Well, so it's been 2 months since our last show, so I'm sure there's lots of stuff to get to. So who wants to start it off first?
Happy New Year, everybody.
Information. Yeah. What's up, Bob? What's up, Yaz?
Yeah, first, hello. We can say hello to the audience, certainly. So what do you want to pick
Hello,
first?
audience.
How about the Agata?
I think, hard forks. I think we should maybe talk about hard forks and how we monitor, client upgrades and all that, and what the future holds for some hard forks for Ethereum Classic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we had Agata in early January, which was our first fork since Atlantis in September, and we had some new toys, didn't we, Kevin?
Yeah, we had some actual monitoring toys, especially etcnodes.org.
ETC nodes.
I mean, before it was pretty much just, what did we would go to Gas Tracker and then
Gas Tracker.
Yeah, we had Gas Tracker, but the problem on Gas Tracker was it wasn't really filtering out like nodes very well, right? So you've got a whole load of bad old data in there of old nodes which were running versions that weren't even in consensus.
Right.
So
it wasn't very reliable. I remember that.
And it's a weird phenomenon, right? That there's just hundreds and hundreds of machines out there running old versions of client software that will never be in consensus. Like they're literally just electricity bills for someone.
And people don't know it.
They don't notice. They don't notice. How can you not notice?
Well, I have to admit, no, I created a node, etcplanet.org, as a learning exercise, and I don't know that I pay too much attention to it. So I'm just as guilty.
I mean, I guess if you're doing that like on an old laptop or something that you've got, fair enough. But most of these are they're on AWS, so people are paying monthly bills.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, it's true.
Like
maybe for quite a lot of money.
It's pretty incredible. You could actually see they're actually deployed on AWS, and it's like, who's running these? Like, are they not running services with them, or obviously not paying attention to them? But yeah, I'm glad we have these new tools to actually monitor the network during upgrades like this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess all I can think is that maybe a lot of them are sort of run by miners who have mined lots and lots of different crypto, and they just have spun up nodes for 10, 20 different things, and then they just sort of forget about it, and they're making so much money that they don't even notice,
Possibly.
Yeah. It would have sucked. I mean, if you're a miner, you don't update your node, and you're mining on an old chain, I think you would notice that your rewards are significantly much higher than they should be. And you can't trade them anywhere.
For sure. And they would know right away. They try to maximize their efficiency all the time, so they would know right away. I think maybe they'd switch to a different token. They'd forget about ETC and then leave their node running or whatever.
Right.
But
as in maybe they've stopped mining because they're like, right, that isn't profitable, but they just sort of keep the node running because maybe they'll go back to it and then forget about it or something.
Or maybe they'll switch once the profitability turns, or maybe they have a script that'll switch for them or something like that. But it's just incredible. There's like you said, hundreds of these nodes that are very far from the current versions. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But maybe we'll actually see those start to change.
And I was looking on Ethereum, and Ethereum's got even a higher rate of these than ETC. And as well as just the higher rate, because they've got more nodes anyway, I mean, it's like 1,000 of them or something on Ethereum of non-consensus nodes.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
And they're on AWS as well.
Yeah, totally.
Or they're using services. It's crazy.
Like,
we're just donating to Jeff Bezos's wealth. We want him to be an even more wealthier person.
maybe they're just heating someone's house, so they don't care whether it's actually making any coins. It's just heating for them.
Oh, I have a question for you guys. Okay, so I forgive me for not following all the hard forks very closely, but can you say the difference between Agartha and Aztlan? Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, so I think firstly that'd be the names. I'm just playing. So, I mean, yeah, this was just like on the road to Ethereum and Ethereum Classic protocol parity. No, Bob?
Yeah, I mean, what you've essentially got was with Atlantis, which happened in September, that was Byzantium opcodes. So the main thing that you had in Byzantium was sort of support for ZK snarks. There were some other bits and bobs, but that was sort of like the most sort of important one. So that got us like up to, I don't know, like 18 months behind, something like that. Maybe I'm not quite exactly sure.
Yeah, around that.
And then what we had with Agartha is Agartha was adding Constantinople opcodes. Now, Constantinople opcodes happened in, I think, January 2019. So then it's like, right, we're a year behind now. And then what we've got with this pending fork, which is a Zatlan, apart from it looks like we're going to have a sort of a second hard fork overlaid, which I was calling Phoenix, which is really just a slight misspecification. So we kind of didn't quite get the spec right. So we need to do a little minor course correction, but looks like it can happen at the same March timeline. What we have there is adding Istanbul opcodes. Now, Istanbul only got activated in December. So it's like we're 3 months behind now. And that 3 months is actually at the same point, right? Because there hasn't been a further hard fork. So we've actually caught up. So at that pending hard fork, we will actually be completely bytecode compatible, as in literally exactly the same tools and anything, just deployed to ETC instead of ETH, and it just works. It's no different than, say, switching between Ethereum mainnet and Goerli. So, Goerli, Kotti, testnets, mainnet, it's like, yep, these are all just compatible different chain instances. That's talking about compatibility of the smart contracts. You've obviously got different monetary policy. You haven't got the DAO fork. You haven't got the historical bloat. So you have a lot of actual practical advantages to deploying on ETC, where, and to this point, we only had like philosophical ones. You basically had to be a true believer and tolerate worse tools. And now it's like, no, like we're completely compatible and everything just works. So it's like you can go in a magical time machine back to 2016 and say, do you want to get all of the good technology, all of the technical improvements, all of the layer 2 stuff can work on top of it just the same, but like none of the bad stuff happened. And it's like you can go in this time machine and get move to an alternate future. So that's what we've coming up, and I'm calling it Phoenix Day. I think we should absolutely call it Phoenix Day. March 25th, meme it to death. We're back.
Okay. Now,
I think that's great. March 25th.
Right.
That's it. Phoenix Day.
Now, I don't. This just to be provocative. So I've always found it amusing when people call ETH the test net for ETC. That they try stuff and then if it works, we pick it up.
It's actually true now, though. It sounded a bit laughable. It sounded a bit laughable, right, when there was such a disparity. But it's true.
Yeah, 'cause like
Actually,
who's
really
DCC,
true.
you know, like yeah, now it's true. It's really true.
But
We've
what I
actually
wanted to,
seen the
right.
adoption of those. I'll go for it. I'm
And
sorry.
in a very practical way. So, for example, in this pending hard fork, we're taking all of the Istanbul opcodes, but we're not taking the gas repricings, which broke all of the Aragon smart contracts, right? Because we don't do that. You know, we care about backwards compatibility and immutability. So we're not exactly following. We're still compatible, but we're you know what we're starting to see, and this is going to be the very first instance, really, is saying, well, look, we're not just following anymore. We are starting to change and lead.
Yeah, and diverge and yeah.
But now there was something I saw on Reddit that said somebody somewhere said, "Hey, with somehow they can be brought together again." Did you guys see that?
Yeah, so I mean
the merge chains.
Yeah, what's going on? What's up with that?
I mean, Way spoke on that right at Summit. You know that there is a technical way that you can merge chains. Because you know it's kind of an interesting kind of prospect. You know, an interesting thought experiment that we're used to thinking about forking, but you know you can potentially merge as well. And the other thing that came up was you know Vitalik said, well, hey, there's no reason why ETC couldn't be like, you know, merged as a shard into F2. And it's like, well, it is technically possible. That doesn't mean it's actually desirable for either.
Yeah, I was wondering exactly. Well, do we want to do that? You know, but no thanks. All right.
So I think he said it was technically possible, but I don't think he shared an opinion about whether he would be for it or not for it or opposed to it. But I wouldn't like to see Ethereum Classic become a shard merged into the Ethereum 2.0 ecosystem.
Well, I mean, it doesn't make sense.
That's just my opinion.
It doesn't make sense because the value proposition of ETC is the proof of work. So if it's a shard in a POS system, well, that's pointless.
Yeah, I think they're just trying to be inclusive and nice to us. They're like, oh, you know, we're doing X, and you know, you can have it too if you need it. You know, so I think it's just like an attitude where like they think they know what we are about, but they think maybe we're gonna change their mind and like, oh, if we do, maybe they want us to join them and be like, oh, you know, if you guys want to be a shard, you know, we totally can consider you.
You can join the club too.
Yeah, it's like, hey, don't feel like we're excluding you, not realizing that we're like, you know, we listen to a different like punk rock band than what they're listening to.
I mean, I saw somebody making a sarcastic comment on Twitter when that had first been raised, where I think they were thinking that Way's proposal was like that was going to happen, you know, like that was a thing that was going to happen. And someone was going, oh, so now that you can get in on the money game, you'll change your tune on immutability, will you? Oh, it's good enough to merge now. It's and it's like, no, not at all. Stop.
So far off, yeah.
All right, so just checking.
I mean, I think where you have got definite value though is looking at interchain stuff, you know, interoperability. Looking at bridges of all kinds. Bridges absolutely make sense. So, you know, where you're looking at, you know, that kind of compatibility and building, you know, so say at the co-op specifically, you know, we are looking at a Bitcoin to ETC bridge using TBTC. We're looking at an Ethereum to ETC bidirectional bridge, probably using AMB from POA network. You know, POA have done a bunch of bridges, you know, with XDAI being their most famous one, where you've got, you know, this sort of side chain used for the burner wallet stuff, and you know that works awesome. And then the other one is Rootstock. You know, talking a lot with Rootstock, who have got a RSK to ETH bridge already. So having a bidirectional bridge between Rootstock and ETC makes a ton of sense. You know, like Rootstock and ETC are very kind of similar sibling-y kind of projects, right? Of both having that Bitcoin philosophy and Ethereum technology. Apart from Rootstock has got Bitcoin and Ethereum technology. So, that's just another flavor again, and absolutely bridge it up.
I think bridges are going to be a really important part moving forward.
But don't merge, because I think that the problem with merge is sort of like this unconditional union of everything. And I think the problem with that is that, so that doesn't help with scalability, say, because you just end up with everything, right? It's just like blobbing everything into one thing. And you don't really want that. What you want is you want to have chains which are serving their purpose, and where you have a need for interoperability between them, you do those like on demand as you need it, right? It's not just a blanket like push of all transactions over to the other one as well, because that just makes it the same. You don't want that. You want it to be an intentional kind of act.
Yeah.
It has a lot of use,
I think
right?
that's like yeah, bridges definitely, but I think like merging, I don't know, I kind of see that as sort of like an attack, like it's a good way of like shutting Ethereum Classic up, and like making sure like it's just one blob altogether now.
Saying it's obsolete. Look, you're technically obsolete now. There's no need for you to be independent, right? Because you're technically obsolete. So here you go. Just here you go in your shard, and we're all friends now. Apart from the implicit thing in there is, oh right, our rules. Yeah, you have to obey our rules now. You're part of the empire.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Even like merge mining, like proposals for merge mining, like are bad. Like either with Ethereum, with Bitcoin, they're really bad because any entry level miner would have to sync not only ETC but like Bitcoin or Ethereum in order to start mining and stuff.
Yeah, I mean you're compromising your security model, right? Because it's this sort of mixed message kind of, I mean, I guess with your merge mining, what you're really saying is, right, we're joining somebody else's empire, right? Think it's the Cold War. Cold War's going on, right? Right, join NATO, right? You're join the Warsaw Pact. You're not good enough to defend yourself, so you've got to join this thing. By the way, you become part of the Soviet Union, but don't worry about it.
Yeah. But I do like the proposal by Wei-Tang, signed mining, where you would have to sign, I forgot how it works, but you have to sign like using your private key that is like available on the current device that you're on, which sort of like it limits 51% attacks like crazy, because nobody can instantiate like a botnet on like servers in order to mine your chain, because then they would have to have the private key on every device, every instance of Amazon person, as an example, which is a big risk for them, because if you get shut down or you get caught, and you shouldn't be doing these kind of things, you endanger your private key. The problem with them is that you sort of, you're ending mining pool. Like mining pool, there's no reason for mining pool to exist, because you'd have to share the private key with everybody in order to do like mining, and nobody wants to do that.
But I'm glad there are people thinking about how to make it more secure.
Yeah, I think it's the most secure method, and I think it's interesting as an experiment. Specifically because it sort of falls back to the original message by Satoshi in the white paper, where one CPU equal one vote. And now that, he never really envisioned mining pools, like people like combining mining power and stuff. We thought it was always going to be like, closer to the, device itself. So it might be interesting like a test net or like some other network to see like how, that affects current mining pool business model. They would probably just have to, everyone, for himself.
Right. Maybe.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, because pools really are a massive centralization vector. I guess you could think of it a little bit like, in politics, they're kind of like political parties. Right? It's like it kind of doesn't matter what your individual voice is. You have to join a party, and that party is going to make decisions, and you just have to go with them. So for example, on forks, it's the pools that make the decision: are they going to follow a fork or not? Right. And where you have like minor votes and that sort of stuff, right? That they're kind of like pooling the votes of those, so they are really like political parties. Really do undermine the supposed representation that you have from individual members of parliament or whatever. It's like you say that you're representing your area, but you're not really.
So it's a constant struggle to try to keep mining as decentralized as possible and as open as possible. Maybe this is a good place to segue into the discussion of the KECHAC 256, because one warning people have had is that you're susceptible to a 51% attack if you're using a mining algorithm that other chains are using. So we use ETH hash, which is what ETH is using. And so then that's one argument for why some people propose that we switch to a different mining algorithm like KECHAC. So anybody have any thoughts or update on the KECHAC 256 mining change proposal?
Yeah, before anybody, gives an update, I just want to frame that argument. So I've been saying as well that, moving to another algorithm doesn't prevent 51% attacks per se, but it more that it fulfills Nakamoto security requirements in order to have a functioning, proof of work network, which states that you need to have a majority, like 51% of your miners have to be honest. And in order for that to happen, you have to have the longest hashing power available for that mining algorithm. So by moving to KECHAC 256, or maybe any other one, if they fulfill that kind of requirement, which is not used by a majority chain, we sort of, follow the Nakamoto security requirements.
I remember, Yaz, when you said that at a previous show, and I remember being impressed that you had thought so deeply about this topic. So you have to have, your chain has to be the one that has the most resources committed to that specific mining algorithm.
Right. In order to fulfill the Nakamoto security assumptions and requirements, which is, to have like a 51% honest mining, we should have that, and we currently don't. Now we're just like in the shadow of Ethereum with the ETH hash algorithm. So it's one of those things where I think like a good moment for ETC to reflect on the fact that even though we're all about immutability and all these kind of principles, we inherited ETC. We didn't design it from scratch. It was like sort of inherited by the community, right? Mm-hmm. And sort of trying to improve it as we get along. We're trying to, sort of improve it while, respecting the immutability requirements, which is like a very challenging design requirement.
Yeah, because I mean, ultimately the most important thing, obviously, is security of the chain, right? More than anything else. You can sit there and go, immutability, and you're like, yeah, but your chain's unusable and attacked and you're useless, and the whole project's over. So well done on your rigidity.
Yeah, exactly.
And the other thing there on that Nakamoto consensus is that at the time that game theory was designed, I mean, that was ahead of even GPUs, FGPAs, let alone ASICs, let alone multiple chains using the same hashing. So a lot of those assumptions, that's not now. They don't work anymore. And as you say, we've inherited the decisions that Ethereum made based on a number of years of observation of what had actually happened in Bitcoin world. But then, the world has moved on again. We're another 5 years in, and it's a really quite different landscape. So, You know, the fact that you have got multiple chains sharing the same hash, and you've got the ability for miners to like jump between these pools, that obviously changes the game theory. You know, it isn't like a closed pool of miners that are all mining Bitcoin and that's all there is in the world. You've got mobility of these miners between different chains, and that needs to be accounted for in the crypto economic incentives design.
Yeah, like going forward.
True. I like
because they got like 2,000 plus coins to choose from.
I like what you said about how it doesn't matter if we stay pure to our philosophy if the chain's not usable and not secure. I mean, yeah, that was a great point.
Right. Like 100% immutability over time. If we maintain 100% of immutability, in theory, we are endangering the network. Like if you don't change anything over the long term, software is very complicated. Like there are things that you need in order to maintain the network, and 100% immutability as the philosophy is really flawed.
The only thing that never changes is a dead body.
I mean, you can't build a network off of a protest, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you look at something, you know, so say the example is always, TCP/IP and everything that's been built on top of that, and, you know, an HTTP and everything, you know, those are not unchanging protocols. You know, they're just very, very slowly changing protocols. You know, so you look at, say, IP4 and then IP6 addresses and stuff, you know, and it's taking whatever 10 or 15 years to roll out. Or say Python 2 to Python 3 again, you know, very, very like long turnover on these things, you know, that you've got huge value from having that stability. Or say Windows, you know, like Windows has been, you know, you can still run stuff from Windows XP now, but it's a high cost for maintaining that compatibility, and it's never like forever that makes sense. You just want very, very long-term stability, and more than anything, you want security of your funds. Like it doesn't make a practical difference to most people if the protocol is slowly changing, as long as it's not putting your funds at risk. Like that's really where the immutability, to my mind, is most important. Is look, funds are not going to be moved from under you without private keys. Like that's the most important element, right? And smart contracts that you've written are not going to get arbitrarily broken. But you know what's happening on the underneath on that. Yeah, you don't completely stop working if there are obvious improvements that can be made. You know, if you can make protocol changes that are going to bring more security, that are going to make it so that things can get propagated around faster, so that you can use like lower spec machines and we can get more nodes or whatever. Obviously you want to do that sort of stuff. And I think the difference on that kind of like basically like maintenance and optimization is that where maybe a lot of chains like Ethereum would be going, okay, well, great, we can up the gas limit, we can do more throughput now, right? We've optimized the client so that we can shove more through the machine. I think what we'd have on ETC is actually the other way around, which is saying, well, great, we've optimized it so we can run it on lower spec machines. Like imagine how great it would be, for example, if you got it so that you didn't need SSDs anymore. Right, we've made enough data, structure changes that you can just run on a normal HD now. So you can just run it on a Raspberry Pi or whatever, right, without any special SSD stuff, and that will work. I mean, how amazing would that be?
That'd be really great.
Yeah, I would just add the way that I see to have the best of both worlds, what you're talking about, where you have stability, but still the flexibility of changing is the changes happen slow, like you said in your examples, IPv6 and Python 2 to 3. And so hopefully the changes happen slowly and they're so non-controversial that nobody makes a fuss.
And also with proper versioning discipline around them, right? So IP6, that works as well as IP4, right? It's not like they've changed what IP4 makes and broken all the routers or whatever. It's a controlled upgrade, And that, I think, is a mechanism that we've really been lacking on Ethereum, and is a real key focus after Azatlan is these proposals around versioning of the EVM, forwards and backwards compatibility, and really just it's just sensible engineering discipline, right? This is not a new problem. This is a solved problem. Is how do you make changes which are not backwards compatible? Well, you do versioning, and it's a major version update. This is Windows 7, this is Windows 8. And it's like, you don't have to upgrade. If you want to stick on Windows 7, you can keep using that stuff. Your Windows 7 apps are still going to work. But, if you want to have ones in the new style, well, they're going to be rebuilds. But you can build all of that stuff at the same time, right? You don't suddenly go, right, all the existing apps for Windows are broken and shagged. Everyone's got to update, you don't need to do that. We can be engineers about this, and I think maybe that's something that ETC can really excel at is just software engineering. Just having that practical engineering focus of doing the unglamorous work that actually makes it good for end users. And there's nothing glamorous about backwards compatibility at all. There's nothing glamorous about really having good discipline about API and ABI design to avoid breaking things. So say taking that Windows example, you can still run Windows XP stuff, Windows 10. And do you think it's pretty how that works? It's not. It's going to be really ugly as sin under the covers of saying, if version is this, then that, if this, then the other, and all of these kind of little kludges and workarounds. And it's a higher overhead for maintaining that, but the benefit is that the users don't get disrupted, right? And that is of massive value. And I mean that really, I think, is the whole social scalability, value of stable protocol pieces. Is it doesn't mean that you stop working on the clients or that you stop changing the protocol. But what you do is you really massively minimize anything which is going to cause disruption at the higher layers. Right? People building dApps on ETC should not be going, oh my God, what have they changed now? Oh God, what have I got to look up? Oh, there's some new thing, is there? I have to do a thing in a different way. We don't. That is the anti-vision of what we want. And Aragon had said this specifically, right? Is so say. We're looking at the gas limit. If we did reduce the gas limit on ETC, maybe that would stop some contracts that work on ETC from working on, that work on Ethereum, would stop them just switching straight over to ETC. And it's not necessarily that that's something hard to fix. It could be you need to break it up into more components and libraries and deploy a bit at a time or whatever, right? But what he said is entirely valid, which is but you shouldn't have to do that, because having to do that is a real cost on a real business, running a real dApp, doing a real thing, and it doesn't have any benefit for them. It's just work that they have to do. And maybe they want to do that work, and maybe they will eventually do that work, but you shouldn't ever force people to have to do that work, right? That's really bad. That's bad behavior, and that's a lack of end user focus. It's really saying, well, look, it's kind of complicated for us to have to do this. So, taking this gas repricing, it's if we have to come up with some versioning system, we're going to have to work out how that versioning works, and we'll have to test it, and then we'll have to deploy it, and then we'll have to think about all these edge cases. And it's you will, because you should. Yeah. And it's not easy. And it is, that's a cost that you have as a maintainer of a shared system, right? I did this for years at EA, worked on central tools groups. You can't break your teams. You can't break your clients. You have to work with them, and you can't force them to update on a schedule that fits your needs, because they've got their own priorities. Right. If there's no ROI on it, they ain't going to do it. Why would they do it?
Now,
there's no reason for them.
Right. You've been talking about issues with willy-nilly changing gas pricing, but there's also been talk about limiting gas, the maximum gas that can be used per block. And can you elaborate? Can you summarize why people think that that's a good idea, and what? I know there's proposals floating around about that, but can somebody chime in about what's going on with that again?
Gas repricing?
No, not the pricing, but there's a proposal.
Oh, the target, the limit.
Yeah, EC 1047, limiting the gas limit proposal. Can you summarize that?
I think Bob or Yaz could more than I could.
Well, sure, I can chip in again. So, I mean, what that really is about is, again, it's sustainability. So what you've had happen on Ethereum is, the gas limit is quite high. It was 8 million gas for a long time, and then it's been up to 10 million. And the consequence of that is, lots of transactions going in, lots of change, lots of state. And the state tree, which is, the data structure that's holding all of these transactions, and that every time you've got a transaction going in, that's getting bigger and more complicated. The size of that data structure is massive now. It's absolutely massive on Ethereum. And the consequence of that is that there's really, really high overhead for running a client. Lots of disk storage use. But more importantly, the IO operations, the input-output operations for syncing are just incredibly expensive. So Eric Wall did his famous "I'm going to try and sync Ethereum" experiment last year, right? And it took him 3 months. Yeah. 3 months to do a full sync. And then Jeff Garzik at Block did another one just recently, 2 months. So basically a 2-month experiment. And he was saying, Jeff, during that time, 2 or 3, having to restart because you've run out of disk space, or because there's been a hard fork in that time. You literally have to stop and install the new version because while you're trying to sync, the protocol's changed on you, So where you expect that kind of time for a protocol update, right? I'll just, turn my machine off up, or, stop it running, put the new version on, put it back in, and that's like a 5-minute operation. It's having to do that. I haven't even got to the head yet.
I'm even there.
Okay, but Bob, I have a question for you, Bob. Though the question, the concern that's in everybody's mind is, okay, if you add a gas limit, then the blockchain won't get as bloated. But then it sounds like you're now hamstringing ETC, that it can't quite service everybody's needs. See what I'm saying?
Well, you are, but again, I mean, it's like the security thing with Kekak. You can, if you service people's needs, and the consequence is that you die because you're so bloated and unusable, then that was pointless anyway. And there is obviously a balance here where if you, the difference I guess you have between Ethereum and a Bitcoin chain is that the operations generally on Bitcoin are all small value transfers. Maybe you've got a little bit of script with it, but they're all fairly small. Where on Ethereum you can do arbitrary computation. So it is possible to have, very complex, expensive smart contracts. And that's where you hit this sort of gas limit thing is if you throttle it down too much, are you starting making things, impossible? So a common example, say, maybe if you're doing some ZK snark expensive cryptography thing, are you making that impossible? And I think in general, those ones are usually getting to the okay kind of point now because of precompiles. That we've got precompiles for most of those mega expensive things. I mean, you might have some smart contracts which are doing some expensive cryptography thing literally as a smart contract, right? No precompiles or anything. It's just literally there's a really complex loop operation or something, right? That's doing some bunch of stuff. it's a bit hard to judge, how much can we pare back without hurting people. And I mean, that's where we're going to have to do some pretty decent research and get some facts of looking at the most popular kind of, Ethereum projects and finding out from them, what is your most expensive kind of operation. And I think that breaks down, from what I can see, into two different buckets, which is that there's transactions for doing smart contract deployments, and there's transactions that are just like transactions. Now, those deployment ones tend to be the biggest, most expensive ones, which are literally like, I am pushing a whole bunch of bytecode onto the chain, right? And it's a big and expensive thing, but you only do it once, right? They're not like typical things. You're not doing those every block. They're just these occasional deploys. And that's where I'd kind of come up with a bit of an idea, which was that there's potential for doing something which Chris Hitchcock kind of tagged as Webpack for Solidity, which is really the idea that if you can do a thing which is that deployment, you could potentially split that up into multiple transactions internally. Like, if you could make it so that you have got like some additional opcodes that are sort of like start, deploy chunk, deploy chunk, deploy chunk, deploy chunk, end deploy, you could potentially have those transactions split across a number of blocks even, right? Like these deployments, it's not like they're time critical. If it doesn't happen in 15 seconds, it's useless. These are slow cadence things, which if they were split over a number of blocks, that would probably be okay. So I think there's potential there for saying, okay, well, if the biggest, most expensive operations, like there are some that are like 4 or 5 million gas, if you could do this, again, a bit of engineering work that maybe uglifies the pattern but actually helps end users, then that could be an awesome solution of saying, well, hey, Ethereum team's looking to come to ETC but worried about the lower gas limit. Don't worry about it, right? We've solved it in the tooling in a way which is opaque to you. You can have your existing smart contracts, you just compile them in this different mode, which is targeting, this is the max gas limit, so you might need to chunk things up a bit. And if it can just do that transparently, within Truffle, within Solidity, on chain, that would be like an amazing bit of engineering, which is unique to ETC. And it's because of that need to balance security with utility, and saying, well, look, for us, we care about the chain being around in decades to come, so we're not going to bloat it up beyond the ability of the code to cope.
You actually, I liked something a lot that you said, which needs to be, maybe some people need to be reminded. So we're not guessing when we're trying to decide the gas limit, because all the transactions, all the costs is transparent, all the history on the blockchain. So like you said, which is correct, you can analyze and you can see how much, what limit works for people, and you can identify the patterns, what type of transactions need the most gas, and then like you're doing, you could propose solutions. And so, that's good.
And I mean, that's exactly the kind of analysis which has guided gas repricing changes that have happened on Ethereum and on ETC. Is, this isn't theoretical stuff. It's actually like analyzing the actual transactions that have happened, and what kind of frequency of different operations have happened, and what, how full or unfull or whatever that you've got. And also, analysis of the actual performance on actual real clients. So saying, how long did it take to process this transaction, on Geth at this particular block, in archival mode, in, normal mode, or what have you. You can measure this stuff. It's not theoretical. It's like you can actually measure this, and the more time that you spend on these, the better answers you can get. I mean, that's another thing which the Ethereum core developers had highlighted to the ETC side of something that we could maybe do that would help both chains would actually be like to fund, some research of like the last 100,000 blocks on both chains and like deeply looking at, the breakdown of these and proposing, alternate gas pricing patterns, that obviously like some of that has happened, but the deeper and the more analysis you do, the better pattern that you can have. And this is really it's like an optimization task of saying, well, look, here we've got this program that's running. How can we make the program run faster? Well, look at where the bottlenecks are and tune appropriately. And that tuning might be at the protocol level with actual gas repricings or different new GOP codes, or it might just be, actual optimization work on specific clients. It might be like, oh, that bit of code is really slow and we should, whatever, add a cache in, or maybe we need to change, the way that we're sorting and searching, or maybe we need to be like doing that in memory, or maybe have a, have old and new blocks and different routes for things which are fresher, or, these are just all standard kind of software engineering things of how to optimize an application or a protocol.
Do you think we'd need to hear some feedback from like actual developers developers who've actually deployed contracts on ETC that have that high of a gas requirement? And then, because I haven't heard any sort of feedback from that sort of a group of developers saying that, hey, this is going to hurt us. We oppose this. I think that might be something that's really important going forward, like getting feedback from actual contracts deployed, from contracts that have been deployed on either network that require that.
Well, I think especially there's value in feedback on the Ethereum side, because on the ETC side, there isn't the richness of DApp ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's going to be all the Ethereum teams that are really pushing the limits on the complexity. So, the primary ones to be talking to would be, like major projects, like Status, Aragon, Compound, Maker, Uniswap, and on and on.
Yeah.
It's the guys doing big shit.
Yeah.
And you really want to be able to say, hey, any of these things, it's just going to work on ETC as well.
And then let me remind some people, in a previous show, we discussed that long-term, in order to power the world, it's not going to be, the long-term vision is likely not everybody running their contracts they're doing their transactions on the main chain. It's going to be all kinds of higher layers, and to minimize the amount of transactions, right? Like with state channels and other mechanisms. So it's not necessarily necessary to keep pounding as much as possible.
No, I think it's a tactical thing for now, is really saying, well, look, anything that you can run on F, you should be able to run on ETC. Caveat, as long as it's not like ruining sustainability. But that's just really a transitional thing. I think, the message I've seen in some places of saying, well, ETC is cheaper. Look, cheap transactions. Like, that's not a good pitch. Like, not at all. Because if that is the case, that's only temporarily the case. In the same way as you have the same way as you have on Bitcoin, high value transactions are what's going to end up being in there. Like, I think the ultimate future for all of these L1 chains is, settlement layer, registry, slow cadence, value transfers. And I think where ETC will differ from BTC is, you will have some potential for doing, more programmability. Say if you've got something like, here's a smart contract, which is like a time lock or an insurance or something, an interest bearing thing, so like a simple financial instrument that you're looking to hold for decades. That's where ETC is going to excel, and is to my mind massively better proposition than doing any of this stuff on F, where you haven't even got a monetary policy, and there's this transition plan to F2, and at that point you're going to be POS, and you've got different risk and security models. Where on ETC here, look, I'm holding. This is where you can hold. So I think ETC has got a way better claim to being digital silver than Litecoin does, because ETC has got additional utility as well as the hard money property, and that additional utility is the smart contracts, and using that utility earns ETC. So exact same thing, right? There you go. There's your silver. It's a really pretty perfect analogy.
I think so.
All right. So we've covered a lot. Is there any other topics we want to address before we close things? We covered everything.
The top 10 on CoinMarketCap this morning, so that's good.
Oh man, I thought that was going to be temporary, and then I looked at it, and yeah, we're there, top 10.
No, I mean I think we're
there. Yeah,
we are solid top tier now, and it's going to be really fascinating at ETH Denver. So Yaz and I are going to be at ETH Denver on February the 13th to 15th. One of the major hackathons. And, it's not going to be ETC little brother anymore. Here we are. And you might not like it, but we're not going away. And, I think there's been a real phase shift the last 2-3 months. And, we're seeing that in the price. We're seeing that in the hash rate. The ratio that there was on the hash rate a year ago, right? At the time of the 51% attacks, there was about a 30x, 30x bigger Ethereum than ETC, and that's under 9 now. Our nice hashable percentage is significantly down. The amount, the cost per hour to attack is moving up. So we are getting more secure, even ahead of any hash change. But on that,
only 36% nice hashable.
Right. And I mean, it's not great, but it isn't that far away from Bitcoin Cash and BSV. Their positions as minority chains. So, but yeah, I mean, I really think it's going to be a massive kind of wake up call, both within the Ethereum community, but broader as well. Is like, ETC. It's not a joke. Like, this is for real. We've got a real simple value proposition that's very simple to understand. And, as I'm talking to Ethereum project teams, about potential ETC support for them, like nobody's like saying, oh, ETC's garbage. Like everyone understands the value proposition.
Yeah.
And it's really just a matter.
Maybe not anymore.
And it's really just a matter of more of anything of going, okay, so we'd like to support ETC, but we've maybe got some transition costs for supporting it, and how many people like is this going to like be a good ROI for us to get involved or not? So it's really a matter, I think, of winning hearts and minds and saying, well, look, like we're for real. It's it's trivial to transition now. Here you go.
The tools are there, yeah.
The tools are there, and if you're looking at ETC as a hard money, well, look, it's a hard money with over $1 billion of value now. We're not little and tiny anymore. We're a serious player, and I mean, I think it's entirely possible looking at the charts above us that move is going to continue upwards, and ETC is not like a little protest coin anymore. Like,
protest.
We're a peer. We're sitting at that same table, and it'll take people a while to wake up to that, right? That's going to be kind of mind shocking. It doesn't fit their mental idiom for a lot of people.
So the future looks bright, in other words. So there's lots of reasons for optimism for ETC, and that's probably a great message to start the first show of 2020 with.
Absolutely. I mean, I mean, Kevin and Yaz, I mean, you guys have been around since pretty much the start. So, I mean, how does this era feel as opposed to, say, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019?
Oh, feels way more exciting, and like there's way more optimism, because back then it was like no tools available to actually make the switch from Ethereum to Ethereum Classic. You know, people thought Ethereum Classic was going to disappear. Now it's like, no, the tools are there. It's not that challenging to move over to Ethereum Classic. And as we can see, the hash rate is climbing. I think it's past all-time highs. And like you said, that the volume is just incredible right now. The trading volume, that's insane. It's a lot more exciting this year for sure. A lot more optimism, I think.
Yeah, I agree with Kevin.
Fundamentally better.
Definitely better, more exciting, more projects and prospects, and like, you know, like you can see like the end of the tunnel.
I mean, how are interactions with people being? I mean, how are you finding that? You know, when you talk to someone about ETC now, what kind of reaction are you getting?
I mean, before it was pretty negative. Now it's like, oh, okay, you guys are ETC. That's cool.
Some respect.
Yeah, it's like really dismissive at first. Like, oh, Ethereum Classic, oh, that's gonna disappear.
Yeah, like now it's like, okay, I mean, there are like a lot of aligned incentives between ETC, ETC and ETH1X. And so, you know, there's a lot of improvement. It's much easier to talk to people at events and hackathons and stuff, and like you advocate development tools to them, even though you come from like an ETC background. There's a lot more reception because we are contributing a lot as well, development-wise and everything. And you know, from a social and community level, we do have a lot of impact. We like a lot of things that we do can impact the larger crypto community. So it's good that now we have a better footing, and we're trying to I don't want to say we invent ourselves, but more like rise like a phoenix.
Yeah, most definitely.
And I mean, I guess another thing as well is, as we are protocol compatible and we can use more of the same tools, right? It's not like we've got, we're like some weird ghetto thing, right? Where we're trying to like push our weird stuff. Like that totally isn't the case. Yeah. It's really like, no, we're using the same stuff. And look, we can contribute to those things and it has a benefit. Well, I say in both ecosystems, but it's more than just two, because you've got all of the enterprise stuff as well. So you've got really sort of like the greater Ethereum ecosystem, the Ethereum stack, which is spanning ETH, ETC, EEA, enterprise Ethereum stuff, Hyperledger, but also like all of the layer 2 things, which are kind of like in Ethereum orbit, but aren't Ethereum, like all of the POA chains or side chains, state channels, optimistic rollups, techs like like Enigma and Midnight. So
yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Nightfall. I mean, Nightfall. I was thinking of EY Nightfall. There's too many very similar names. Almost as bad as Genesis. There's so many things called Genesis. My God.
Lots of things to be paying attention.
I get those confused all the time, Genesis.
All right. Well, why don't we end there? And I'd like to thank you, as always a pleasure. Thank you, all you guys, for joining me and giving the community an update.
Thank you, Christian.
Thanks for having us, Chris.
Until next time.
No ETC.